A blessed day to everyone, especially to you, Ma'am Tabay. I am Erman Kalehara from Section PMGO1 and one of the members of Group 3. And today, together with my group mates, we are here virtually in front of you to discuss our assigned topics for our report in GE6 Art Appreciation, which are Realism, Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, and lastly, Neo-Impressionism. So in this session, we are going to provide you with a discussion of this art period or movements, some examples, how are they considered an art, and their historical and contemporary significance. So without further ado, let's start. So here are the members of Group 3. We have yours truly, Erman Colejara, Miss Desiree Aquino, Miss Hanifel Caserva, Miss Lucy Decena, Mr. Jason De Los Santos, Miss Mary Jane Emawan, Miss Charis Navavos, Mr. Rexer Paduhinog, Miss Laika Pagador, Miss Lovely Shane Perez, and lastly we have Miss Christine Sinini. So before we proceed with the discussion proper, let's read our target objectives for this session first. At the end of this presentation, you are expected to first identify the defining characteristics and styles of the four modernism art movements. Second, appreciate the key artists and their arts in each art movement. And lastly, develop an understanding of their historical and contemporary significance as both art styles and movements. So together with Ms. Charis Navabos, we will be discussing the first topic, which is realism. First, let's define realism in art. The realism movement is one of the key art periods in human history during which artists engineered a profound shift in the way that art was created, defined, and conceptualized. The realism art movement originated in 19th century France due to the Industrial Revolution and the harsh realities birthed from it. During the 19th century, an art style known as Romanticism, which overemphasized the emotion and size of life, was in full swing. Realism art emerged as a direct opposition to both this extravagant romanticism and the unrealistic portrayals and techniques of other classical arts. Realism in art serves as a representation of the world as realistically as possible. It focuses on representing life in the ideals or more abstract concepts such as poverty and the working class. Realistic artworks show the viewer a scene from real life as if through a window. Working in a chaotic era marked by revolution and widespread social change, realist painters replaced the idealistic images and literary conceits of traditional art with real-life events, giving the margins of society similar weight to grand history, paintings, and allegories. Their choice to bring everyday life into their canvases was an early manifestation of the avant-garde desire to merge art and life, and their refusal of pictorial techniques like perspective prefigured the many 20th century definitions and redefinitions of modernism. So now that we have known the definition and overview of realism, let's proceed with its defining characteristics. First, we have the common subjects in realism. French artists initially used realism to sarcastically depict political issues and problems. Other artists incorporate realism by painting scenes of the working class, rural and urban life, and portraits dealing with the naked body. Artists strove to create works that were raw and natural, as close to a photograph as possible. Second, we have the importance of detail. Completely opposite of the soft look of Romantic Impressionism, realist painters include as much detail as possible in their work. Shadows, light reflecting off of surfaces, depth perception, and perspective need to be considered carefully to create a work that looks like a viewer could reach out and touch it. For both still life and light compositions, this meant capturing the subject with complete clarity. Number 3, we have the use of color. Early adopters of the realist style tended to incorporate warmer hues and color palettes in their works. Modern-day realists still use warm palettes, but play more with cooler color combinations to create startling effects. So now let's proceed with the famous realist artists and their artworks. Several 19th century French artists helped to establish the ground rules for realism with their paintings. Among the significant figures and artworks in the movement were number 1, Gustave Courbet. Often referred to as the father of realism in art, Gustave Courbet painted figures as he saw them, no matter how ordinary they may have been. He often spoke against the romanticization of the world through art and strove to represent the world emotionless through his paintings. One of his most famous paintings, The Stone Breakers in 1849, featured laborers with their faces turned away from the viewer, toiling in dirty clothes to create gravel for a road, depicting many of the features of realism painting such as a focus on everyday workers and settings. Some of his artworks include The Desperate Man in 1845, A Burial at Ornans in 1850, and Jo, the Beautiful Irish Girl in 1866. Second, we have Jean-Francois Milot. Jean-Francois Milot came from Courbet and specialized in depictions of the poor farmers of the French countryside. He also detested Romanticism, so much so that he founded a school of artists dedicated to challenging the ideals of Romanticism called the Barbizon School. His 1857 painting, The Gleaners, focuses on the physical skill required by three women working in a wheat field. Like Courbet's The Stone Breakers in 1849, the painting is meant to depict both the hardships and the dignity of regular people at work, bringing empathy and recognition to their difficult station in life. Millet's other famous paintings include The Winnower in 1848, The Sower in 1850, and The Angelus in 1858. Number 3, we have Honoré Daumier. Daumier was a printmaker and painter whose caricatures captured the social, political, and economic differences between the city's upper and lower classes and drew attention to the difficult conditions under which many French citizens lived. His 1834 work, Rue Transnona, showed the aftermath of a riot in Paris, in which government troops discharged their weapons on innocent bystanders while in pursuit of a suspect. Daumier's work would influence an offshoot of realist art called social realism, which flourished in the United States in the 19th and 20th centuries. Number 4, we have Rosa Bonheur. One of the most accomplished female realist painters of the 19th century, Bonheur's images of animals found the rough-hewn beauty of life in France's fields and farms. Her 1848 work, Blowing in the Nivernais, extended the depiction of natural conditions found in realism to the animals seen in everyday life. Her paintings of farmers and their oxen working in the field unapologetically depicts the reality of these works for both man and animal. Her other paintings include The Horse Fair in 1855 and Sheep by the Sea in 1865. Lastly, we have Edward Hopper, arguably the most famous figure in American realism. His paintings emphasize stillness, detachment, and distance. His 1942 painting, Nighthawks, which spies on the patrons and staff at a late-night diner, is among the most recognized American art paintings. Other notable key artists of the realism movement were Edward Manet, James Whistler, John Singer Sargent, Thomas Eakins, Ilya Repin, and Henry Fantine Latour. These artists helped to establish the ground rules for realism with their paintings. So I guess that would be all for my part. I hope you have learned a lot from my discussion. And now I pass the floor to the next reporter, Ms. Charis Novavos.